Hello and welcome back. Today I'm working with a piece of sumac wood. It's one of those materials that's always a bit special because every piece looks completely different. This one comes straight from the trunk with a natural shape that already suggests what it could become. So let's mount it on the lathe and see where this piece takes us. As I start shaping the outside, there's one detail I notice. A part of the bark is missing. It's not ideal for a natural edge piece, but instead of trying to hide it completely, I'll work around it and try to improve it along the way. Now that the piece is mounted on the lathe, I start by bringing it into a round shape. At this stage, it's all about control, just carefully removing material until the blank becomes a clean cylinder. Once everything is balanced, I can increase the speed a bit and work more smoothly. From here, I move on to shaping the ball. I begin with the bottom part, slowly defining the base and setting the foundation for the final form. This step is important because the overall shape depends on it. So I take my time, keeping the cuts clean and controlled, and letting the shape develop gradually. For this piece, I'm planning the base a bit differently. I want to create a foot that will also work as a tenon for the chuck. But instead of making just one, I'm actually turning two separate tenons. The first one will be used later when I start working on the inside of the ball, and the second one will allow me to reverse the piece and hold it securely again while I finish the outside. It's a small detail, but it makes the whole process much more controlled, because once you start removing material from the inside, you really want the piece to be held as securely as possible. So by planning this in advance, I avoid problems later. At this stage, I'm focusing on the base, defining the shape of the foot, and making sure both tenons are clean and precise. Everything needs to run true, because even a small imbalance here can affect the final result. I'm taking light cuts, checking the shape and adjusting as I go. This is one of those steps that doesn't look very exciting, but it makes a huge difference in the end. Now I'm finishing the second tenon. This one is slightly smaller, made to fit a different set of jaws. I'm aiming for around 55 millimeters, so it sits clean and secure in the chuck. At this stage, accuracy really matters. If the fit isn't right, the piece won't hold properly later on. So I take a bit of extra time here, checking the size, refining the edges, and making sure everything is clean and precise. Once this is done, I know I'll be able to reverse the piece without any issues and continue shaping with full control. Now that I've reversed the piece, I need to clean up the top edge. Because of the natural edge, the surface isn't perfectly even. So before I can go any further, I have to level this area. This step is important. It gives me a clean, flat surface where the smaller jaws can grip from the inside later on. Without that, the piece wouldn't sit securely in the chuck. So here, I take light cuts, just removing enough material to create a smooth and even surface. Not too much, just enough to make everything work properly. This is one of those steps that sets things up for the final stages. Once it's clean and balanced, I can move on with confidence. Now that I've mounted the piece back, you can see how smoothly it runs on the lathe. There's almost no vibration, and that's exactly what I want. It means everything is still perfectly centered, because even a tiny misalignment, just a millimeter off, would be enough to throw the whole piece out of balance. And then finishing the outside would become much more difficult. But now everything is running through, so I can take my time and focus on refining the outside of the bowl. This is where I shape the final curves and bring everything together, including the bottom, which gives the piece its final stability and character. At this stage, it's all about clean lines, smooth transitions, and a balanced form. No rushing, just small, controlled cuts until everything feels right. Before moving on to sanding, I add one more detail to the base. I create a small recess around 40 millimeters in diameter where I'll later place our coin. It's a small element, but it gives the piece a more finished and personal touch. Details like this might not stand out immediately, but they make a big difference in the final impression. And now I move on to sanding. This part of the process isn't the most exciting to watch, so I'll speed things up a little. But even though it looks simple, it's actually one of the most important steps. This is where all the small tool marks disappear and the surface starts to feel smooth and refined. As I work through the grits, the grain becomes more visible and the character of the wood really starts to come through. It's also the stage where you can really see if the shape works or if something still feels off. So even here, I'm still paying attention, making small adjustments if needed. I'm curious, how would you approach something like this? Would you also use 2 tenons to keep full control throughout the process, or do you prefer a different method? When working on a bowl like this, let me know in the comments. Now it's time for the finish. I'm applying our own blend combination of carnauba wax and tung oil. As it goes onto the surface, you can immediately see the difference. The grain becomes deeper, the colors richer, and the whole piece starts to come alive. This is always one of my favorite moments, because this is where everything comes together. All the work, all the small adjustments finally reveal their full effect. Now I come back to the part where the bark was missing. This is something I wanted to fix from the beginning. So instead of leaving it as it is, I take a piece from the leftover wood from the same material, so the color and texture stay as close as possible. However, I carefully cut out a small section that could fit into the missing area. At this point, it's not about speed anymore. It's about precision, because if the fit isn't right, it will always be visible. So I start adjusting both parts, shaping the piece, and at the same time, refining the area on the bowl. Little by little, testing the fit, removing just enough material until everything starts to come together. Then too, the goal here is simple: to make the repair blend in as naturally as possible. Not to make it perfect, but to make it feel like it belongs there. And this is where patience really matters, because every small adjustment brings it closer to that final fit. Now I move on to the inside of the bowl. I start with the 16mm ball gouge, which gives me enough stability to begin shaping the interior. At this stage, I'm working gradually, removing material step by step and defining the depth and overall form. But as I go deeper, there's a limit to how far I can comfortably reach. With this tool, the angle becomes tighter and control gets more difficult. So this is where I switch tools. I move to a rounded scraper, which allows me to reach those areas more easily. With it, I can refine the bottom and smooth out the transition into the walls. Instead of cutting aggressively, I'm now focusing on refining the surface, removing the last tool marks and creating a clean, even finish inside the bowl. At this point, everything starts to feel more complete. The shape is there, the walls are even, and the inside flows naturally into the overall form. As I finish the inside of the bowl, this is where the surface really starts to matter. The bottom, the transition into the walls, everything needs to feel smooth and natural. I'm curious, how do you usually finish the inside bottom of a bowl? Do you stick with the bowl gouge or switch to a scraper like this? Or maybe you use a completely different technique? Let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to see how others approach this. Working on the inside always feels a bit different. You don't see the full shape all at once, you have to trust the form as it develops. Every small change affects how the bowl will look and feel in the end. Here, I'm paying attention to the depth, the curve, and how everything connects from the center outwards. It's a quiet process, but one where you need to stay focused, because even a small inconsistency can stand out later. As I continue refining with the scraper, the surface starts to even out. The tool becomes lighter in my hands and the movements smaller. At this point, it's not about shaping anymore, it's about finishing the form. And once everything feels right, that's when I know it's time to move on, because the next step will bring out everything that's already there. Now I'll move on to sanding and start revealing the final surface. I start with 120 grit and gradually work my way up to 320. With each step, the surface becomes smoother and the grain starts to show more and more. This is where the wood really begins to reveal its character. I'm curious, what would you make from a piece like this? Besides a bowl, a vase, or a pen, would you turn it into something different? Let me know in the comments. Once I'm happy with the surface, I move on to the finish. I apply our own blend of carnauba wax and tung oil, bringing out the depth of the grain and giving the wood a warm, natural look. And this is where everything really comes together. If you're interested, this finish is available on our website. You'll also find the link in the description, and it's displayed in the top right corner of the video. Now I finish applying the last coat of the finish, making sure everything is even and nicely absorbed into the wood. The surface now has that soft, natural glow, and the grain really stands out. To complete the piece, I attach our coin to the bottom of the bowl. A small detail, but one that makes it feel truly finished. And this is the final result. A unique piece of sumac wood, shaped by hand, with all its natural character still preserved. If you'd like to own this exact bowl, it's available on our website. And if you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share the video with someone who appreciates handmade work. We've already created more than 600 videos with over 7 million views, and we're truly grateful for every single one of you who watches, supports, and follows our work. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.